Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I wanted to go over Titania, since they changed her exalted weapons, the Dex Pixia, in the Sacrifice update. Previously they were primary weapons, but now they are secondaries. And because secondaries have some of the best mods in the game, this has definitely been a buff, although they didn't need it. Her exalted pistols, even with minimal investment, destroy almost anything in the game, and I'm going to be showing that in the second part of this video. But for the first part, as usual, I'm going to first give an overview of her abilities, and then I'll talk about my build for both the frame and the weapons, and the choices I made there. And then in the second part, I'll show some gameplay and do a little commentary over it, giving my thoughts about Titania and her build. So for this warframe, I'm going to first talk about her 4, called Razorwing. This is the form where you can use her exalted weapons. If you're not using Razorwing, you're playing Titania wrong. It's that simple. While in this form, Titania shrinks down to a quarter of her size and becomes a flying pixie. She loses all of her regular weapons and gains 2 exalted weapons, the Dex Pixia, her machine pistols, and the Dewata, her sword. Also, while in this form, she gains 50% evasion against enemies, making her harder to kill. The Dex Pixia are the weapons you should be using while in this form. While the Dewata isn't complete garbage, it's pretty bad, and I'll show you that in a second. But as you can see, using my Radiation Dex Pixia build, Titania destroys these level 155 corrupted bombards. I've just paused the AI here to better show her destructive power. Now, the Dewata is another story. Testing this on one of the toughest enemies in the game is not the best showcase for this melee weapon. However, it does show the vast difference between her machine pistols and her melee. The last thing about Razorwing is while it's active, Titania gains 6 Razorfly drones that attack enemies and take damage for her. But that about covers it for her Razorwing. Razorwing is Titania's only good ability, so you might as well just skip ahead in the video now.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.
I'm just kidding, guys. Okay, so if you stuck around, I'm sure you want to see what Titania's other abilities do, or at least get a little better understanding of them. I'm just going to go over them quickly, because honestly, you won't really see any use case scenarios for them, but it's good to have an overall understanding of how she works. So here you see me using Titania's 1 Spellbind. Spellbind is an ability that is cast in an AoE, and ragdolls enemy units while giving friendly units status immunity. But as you can see, if you don't kill the enemies quickly, it can be very annoying to try to chase them down. The one major use for this ability is for Razorwing Blitz, which I'll talk about more in the second part of the video. Titania's second ability, Tribute, can be cast on enemy units. When cast on enemy units, Tribute ragdolls the enemy and leaves behind an after image of them the same color as your energy. When Titania comes into contact with one of these after images, she gains a buff depending on the type of enemy you've cast Tribute on. There are 4 types of buffs she can gain, and each buff can stack up to 5 times. I'm not going to go into the individual buffs or enemy types, but I'll leave a link in the description if you're curious. Titania's third ability, Lantern, is her CC ability. To showcase this best, I've turned back on enemy AI as well as immunity. As you can see, when I cast Lantern on an enemy, similar to Spellbind, they float away. However, here the Lantern attracts the attention of the other enemies, allowing them to focus on the Lantern instead of you. Because of the ragdoll here, the Lantern can be very hard to control and is really not useful in most scenarios. It's much easier to just kill the enemies. All 3 of these abilities can be cast from Titania's Razorwing mode. However, as you'll see later in the video, I generally only use her first. For her last ability, I changed my energy color so you guys could better see the effect. This is a passive that lays down these ground effects, which while inside them increase bullet jump distance for both you and your allies by 25%. But that's going to do it for her abilities. Let's look at how I modded her. For this build, I've essentially gone for maximum efficiency with both fleeting expertise and streamline. Having maximum efficiency allows you to stay in your Razorwing as long as possible, which is all we're going for here. Once you have 175% efficiency, you've reached the minimum channeling cost for Razorwing, and duration no longer has an effect. I've also grabbed Prime Flow for the same reason. The bigger your energy pool, the longer you can stay in Razorwing. I have Vitality for survivability. Remember, you also get 50% evasion while in Razorwing. And I have Continuity to ensure my duration is not very negative due to fleeting expertise. While maximum efficiency Razorwing does not benefit from the duration, Titania's other buffs do, and it's important to not be very negative in this stat. I've also gone for a little bit of ability strength here. However, I'm not using either Transient Fortitude or Blind Rage because I want to avoid the negatives they give me. And trust me, with this much strength, Titania is still going to hit like a truck. And last but not least, probably the most important mod, Razorwing Blitz. This is the Syndicate augment for Razorwing. When using this mod, every ability you cast gives you a stacking buff of both flight speed and fire rate. This both increases your DPS and makes Razorwing's movement speed very respectable. Razorwing Blitz also scales with power strength, so if you want to go extremely fast, you can get tons and tons of power strength. But be warned, it's hard to control. And like I said, in my opinion, you definitely don't need the extra damage. As far as auras go, I have Corrosive Projection, but you can also use something like Growing Power, but you should know Energy Siphon does not work with Razorwing. Speaking of energy, for my Archeins, I'm using Arcane Energize and Arcane Velocity. I realize not everybody's going to have Energize, so I'm going to give you a list of Arcanes that you can run with Titania. Because Dex Pixies are now secondaries, you can run all secondary Arcanes with them, as well as currently you're able to use your Rifle Arcanes. However, this might be an oversight since the patch, but I'll list them anyways for your convenience. So in terms of DPS, you want to be running Arcane Velocity if possible, since it gives you an 80% fire rate bonus, which you have up 100% of the time. And as far as I'm aware, all the Arcanes I'm about to list can stack, including Arcane Velocity. So if you want, double up on them. Next up we have Rage, which will give you 120% damage on headshot. Next up we have Arcane Precision, which also gives 120% damage on headshot. And finally, Arcane Acceleration, which gives 60% fire rate on crit. The reason I'm using Velocity over one of the damage mods is because you have to get headshots with those, making them harder to proc. And Velocity is just a simpler way to get more damage. Now let's talk about my Dex Pixia builds. So this first build is the one I use the most often. It's a simple Radiation Crit build. For this I'm not going Status Chance because the Radiation proc is not particularly useful, and I'm basically just using this for Primed Heated Charge. But the build itself should be pretty simple. I'm using Hornet Strike with the 2 pistol crit mods, and then I have the 2 pistol multi-shot mods with Augur Pact for a little extra damage, and then Convulsion and Primed Heated Charge for radiation. If you don't have the Prime mods here, just use the normal versions, and you can substitute out Augur Pact for either Anemic Agility or Gunslinger if you'd rather have the fire rate over the extra damage. However, between Razorwing Blitz and Arcane Velocity, I find I run out of ammo very quickly anyways. The next build I want to talk about is my Corrosive build. This build is generally the same, other than the fact that I'm using the dual status mods, Jolt and Pistol Pestilence, to increase my chance of proccing corrosive statuses. Personally, I do use the Radiation build more often than the Corrosive build, but it's all up to you and what content you're doing. And finally, my Daiwada build. For this, I'm going for a simple crit plus Corrosive build. And as you saw earlier, this weapon kind of sucks. I would certainly not recommend investing the Forma into it unless you have lots to spare. Not that it's unusable, it's just far less effective than Dex Pixie is. But that does it for the modding section of the video. Now I'm going to play some gameplay in the background and give a little commentary with my thoughts over it. I wanted to show a couple scenarios where Titania really shines, and one of those is definitely Lephantis, which also shows up during the Plague Star event. And Titania just melts this boss. You can basically cast her one Spellbind as needed to proc your Razorwing Blitz, and again this ability can target both enemy and friendly targets. While I'm waiting for the heads to spawn, I'm casting my Spellbind on enemies outside the gate to keep up my Razorwing Blitz. And after I empty my clip, I typically cast my one again to refresh the duration. But as you can see, it destroys Lephantis. And the next thing I did was a tier 5 bounty. You can cast Spellbind on any friendly target. That includes the drone and any defense point. So you see me cast it whenever I'm reloading. to ensure my buff is refreshed. But Titania kills basically everything on the plains. If you are using Titania exclusively for the plains, you might want to have higher power strength, because that will also increase her flight speed while using Razorwing Blitz, but it's totally up to you. And all this gameplay was done with my radiation build, including Lephantis. But I hope this has given you guys a good idea of how to build Titania, and what her new modding setup is like with the secondary mods. But she's a really fun Warframe, despite her 1 through 3 abilities being pretty bad. That's going to do it for me. I hope you guys have a good one. And if you found this video helpful, please do leave a like and subscribe for future content.